So those are the old days gone where the only source of knowledge was a professor.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today it is an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce you all to this very particular session where we are going to know more about the future of higher education. My name is Harsh and I'm going to moderate this session for all of you, wherein I'm going to introduce you all about the session and perhaps the person who is going to interact and address all of us. First of all, I request you to kindly acknowledge and welcome the presence of our esteemed guest, Professor Raghuveer Singh, who is here with us. I would like to request all the person, those who are watching this session on YouTube, to kindly upload in the comment section and welcome the presence of our guest. Professor Raghuveer Singh currently holds the position of Vice Chancellor of Tirthankar Mahavir University, Muradabad, UP. He has been in management education for last 27 years. Some of the prominent institutes where he has served at senior positions are Director Business School, Manipal University, Jaipur; Head Management Group, BITS Pilani; Director and Executive Secretary, Indian Society for Technical Education, Delhi. He is trainer per excellence in soft skills and has conducted numerous workshops. And I believe his profile has so many things, so many glories, which I won't be able to explain in next few minutes. But I'm pretty sure during this conversation, we are going to learn a lot from him. Also, you may read about more about him in the description of this video. So sir, first of all, I welcome you to in this session. Thank you so much for joining and agreeing to share your thoughts with us. We are extremely very happy to have you for today's talk.
Thank you so much, Hers. It's been wonderful interaction with you, I'm sure, and a lot of my young friends will benefit from our discussion. I
Thank
look
you so
forward to
much.
this.
Thank you so much, sir. It's our pleasure to. So, sir, moving to the topic of today's session, which we have chosen is understanding India, the future of higher education and opportunities. Sir, my first question to you is: we have recently seen our government of India has recently introduced a new education policy. Sir, my first question to you is: do you think will it change the future of higher education in India?
Hers, let me be very frank. We were too late to introduce this. At least about 20 to 25 years late. The new national education policy has been able to put together all those possible perspectives which would make our education meaningful and more relevant. So every aspect has been touched upon, whether it is inside the classroom, outside the classroom, macro level, micro level, and how it has to be organized. If you look at the student perspective, let's first look at the student perspective, right? The National Education Policy 2020 emphasizes on learning. It doesn't talk about getting a degree alone. It talks about learning. Today, what is happening is that our degrees are, prepared on the basis of specific subjects, right? And they are available off the shelf. Off the shelf, you understand? That means you go, enroll, complete, and buy the degree. Whether it is to your interest, to your liking, and where it will lead to is not catered. Right? The proposed changes are that the degrees can be custom built. That means depending upon the student's interest and his or her relevance to the future, one can choose his or her courses during that period of time. Also, at the same time, it says that based upon your own capability and interest, you can do a 3-year degree, you can do a 4-year degree, right? You can have a cross disciplinary areas as you would like to do. The thought behind it, the philosophy behind it is like every organization, or for that matter, society, expects you as an individual to be a T-shaped person, or a T-shaped professional, which means as a professional, you should have a deep dive in your own domain, the strong knowledge and skills, on your domain. That's the, that bar of the T. And the two arms of the T say that you should be relevant to the society in terms of should have a soft skills to deal with the realities of the life. See, the life is not a straight line. The life is truly like an ECG of a young heart. It's good to have ups and downs. Similarly, the life itself is full of obstacles, difficulties, pitfalls, hurdles, right? And you should learn to deal with them. And that is why a student comes to a college. He or she has to be given that experience. So learning is all about that experience inside the classroom and outside the classroom during that period of degree. That is what the new education policy envisages. Unless otherwise, a student is exposed to all that right in his or her degree, he or she becomes a young irrelevant to the society. There is no point. See, like years and years back, the great scientist Einstein said, if you have only super specializations in your education, then we don't prepare holistic people relevant to the society. You prepare robots powered by artificial intelligence will have no relevance to the society, no emotions, right? So therefore, this age or era of super specialization is not going to be relevant to the society and to the nation. Hence, today we cry for those 3 important, learning domains which was given by Bloom in 1956. He says, for an holistic education, there are 3 important domains. One is the cognitive domain. That is your thinking part, knowledge part, right? Thinking part means you got to have both higher order thinking and a lower order thinking. Lower order thinking deals with your understanding of the concepts and the issues. Higher order thinks about connecting the entire perspective of not only your own domain, but related to outside. Then able to analyze that. Unless you can apply the knowledge, there's no point of having a knowledge, right? And then you should be able to create something new. That is in higher order. That means a student is expected to have not only the knowledge, you need to have intelligence, you need to have a wisdom, all the 3. All these 3 cannot come unless otherwise your curriculum consciously prepares you for this. So here comes the role of entire society, the parents, the teachers, and in this, the most important role is of the student himself. And then second domain is called affective domain, is called soft skills, right? See, when you look at the soft skills, a lot of people may not understand the importance of soft skills. See, as long as things are going good for you in life, whether on job, with friends, or in the family, you don't need soft skills. It's only when adversity strikes you, only when things go wrong, that is where soft skills will you take out from the troubles, will save you from those troubles. So in those undesirable situations which you might fall in, and you will fall because you will be working with people, not machines. And people are unique, right? They have that uniqueness on various aspects. So you're bound to have all those issues with people, and that is where your soft skills helps. The third most important domain is psychomotor domain. That is ability to do, ability to perform. Unless you have that, then all your degrees are irrelevant. So we in university, in the Tirthankar Mahavir University, have consciously developed a concept where we will design our psychomotor skills around the profiles, that is careers which students want to have, rather than offer them a degree, take that degree and go out in the market and find what is relevant to you. So we first look at the relevance in the society, in the your job market, that is what is required by you, and your own interest. Accordingly, you choose it. That is how we are going to do it.
Indeed, sir. I think you have given very detailed overview on this national education policy, and I think it's a kind of privilege today we got to hear all these things. As you have told that we may be late on this new education policy, but it is going to be meaningful. Sir, my next question to you is: during this lockdown, we have seen that during this lockdown, the e-learning concept has grown up. Sir, what are your thoughts? Future of edutech? What India's education system can learn from e-learning?
See, Hers, let me appreciate and accept it as a lead education leader that e-learning or tech, for that matter, has really helped us to save our skill. Without technology, probably we won't have been where we are today. Technology has helped us to keep the continuity of learning. So that let's appreciate. Now, during this period, you must have seen large number of platforms have sprung up. Good. Now, e-learning has its own big advantage. They do have some shortcomings also. See, let's look at the first fundamental question. Why should a student come to the college or an institution? It's not just knowledge. Knowledge will be provided you all those platforms today. Knowledge is available everywhere, anywhere, every time, to everyone. So those are the old days gone where the only source of knowledge was a professor. He used to have his notes in the armpit close to him, and nobody will have access to it unless otherwise he comes and delivers his or her lecture. But today, the knowledge is spread or available across anything, right? So these platforms will provide you the knowledge. Now the question comes, as I mentioned earlier, the proposed objectives of our national education policy. How do you develop a holistic person? Platforms cannot develop a holistic person, right? I come to the college because I want to gain a confidence to face the real life situations, right? I come to the college to get networked. I come to the college to face real situations which might arise. I come to the college to get exposed to heterogeneous group of people and learn from them. All that is not possible on tech platforms. Right? So as a true holistic person, if you're looking for, and that's the actual meaning of education. See, unfortunately, let me also add, when you look at our degree, when you look at a holistic person, he has three important hats. That is, he has head, heart, and hand. Right? Soul, body, mind, isn't it? So our degrees have been created by universities in a very narrowly focused, regulated and restricted way, where we are made to use a very small portion of our mind. So your heart, body, and rest of the mind is not used. And that is what will continue to be on your e-learning platforms. They would probably be an alternative source for the knowledge seekers or experienced people who wants to get into the new areas where they want to gain a knowledge, not beyond that. As of now, technology might tomorrow, as we are already getting exposed, might do wonders in future. I'm not talking about future, right? So if we as professors do not change, as universities do not become relevant, then you will find people switching over to the e-learning. So we have as a university or as professors a great challenge to find new ways of engaging our students, giving them a different experience within the classroom and outside the classroom. Otherwise, it is for sure that these e-platforms will be a replacement or will be an alternative to the student. So if you want the holistic use of your 3S, come to the college, because colleges will provide you not only the curricular activities, they will provide you co-curricular activities, extracurricular activities, and extramural activities, which doesn't happen in platforms. That is my take.
All right, sir. Again, it was really a quite insightful answer from your side. Sir, my next question to you is what is the role of India's higher education institution in empowering entrepreneurship? What more might universities do to promote entrepreneurship within the colleges?
Yes, if you look at last 10 to 15 years, this word called entrepreneurship was very, very restricted to an elite part of the society. Very few people knew that, what is an entrepreneurship and how it is possible. Today, the new technology has made this field as easy as for everybody and anybody as you're getting a degree from the university. And if you look at around your own self, whether it's around me or around you, you will find a very next door boy hitting as a big entrepreneur, somebody who started with this, just an idea, had nothing else with him, right? So the environment which we have created within the country actually sipping down to the last person through various channels. And university has a great role to play because university is a powerhouse of these great minds and young, bubbling, energetic youth who only can change the world, who only can change the country. So all of us, if you look at the way government is trying to push it down, the way government is trying to popularize through various hackathons, whether it's a hackathon or many others, toyathon, so much emphasis from the government. Because government is able to see today, unless we create these entrepreneurs from young, you would have a large youth as unemployed, which probably might not be all that useful to the society. Hence, this is not only standing on your legs, but also finding relevance for the self. And then it automatically contributes to the society and to the nation. So you will find in the future, more and more people not only talking about entrepreneurship, but become entrepreneurship. So universities are the hub, let me put it. They will, over a period of time, create more and more youth towards this, right? So it's a great time, let me tell you, for the youth. Everything is available. The knowledge is available. The funds are available. The guidance is available. The plans has to be taken by the youth. And tell you a very unique story, right? Which has just happened today in India. See, a lot of us might fear a lot of us might not start because of the fear of failure, right? But you need to take a plunge. You remember the current Indian team is right now touring Australia. The first test match, India was bundled out for 36 runs in the second innings. And look at today's result. What does it actually teach us to all of us is, never mind, even if you score 36%, it doesn't mean that you will be failure in life. You can always come back, start believing your abilities, okay, and determined to conquer the world. You will do it.
Again, sir, it was really a very wonderful message from your side, and I think the viewers, those who are watching this session, they will learn from this. And not only I think, but I do strongly believe this. And let me tell you, sir, let me tell all my viewers that late former Prime President APJ Abdul Kalam once said to students of the prestigious Wharton Business School, America's oldest institution of its kind, the great challenge of transforming India can be achieved through youth, which has got the power of ideas, ambition, and ability. And I think the last few years we have seen that the universities and the college are promoting this entrepreneurship, and it's really a great thing. If you see that they are either setting up the incubation center or they are setting up the innovation studio, it's really a great initiative, I think, sir. Sir, I have my next question to you is. I have a question from one of my subscriber. Some people consider that IITs and IIMs are overrated. What are your views?
I don't agree. Subscriber might is free to have any idea. They are one of the finest and best institutions in the country. Many, detractors do come up with, a question that. Hey, they are not world class. They don't fall into first 100 and second 100, etc., etc. They do have, but they also have to understand the fact that every country has its own ecosystem. We operate within our given ecosystem, right? Why we don't get into the top 100? The people have to understand. See, when you look at the ranking of international bodies like Times Higher Education or QS ranking or the Shanghai ranking, all of them have so much of emphasis on internationalization of education. We don't have in our country, right? And we do not have that industrial ecosystem also, where we have a top-class multinational companies, because all these ranking bodies take feedback or survey from top companies of the world to identify where our students serve, how they are doing it. So the ranking factors, they in fact favor so-called foreign universities, and that suits to their ecosystem. So if we are able to create that ecosystem within us, we would be able to do it. So when you look at, if that was the true, which your subscribers, are trying to propagate, then today you won't have more than 20 world-class companies being headed by Indian CEOs, and all of them are either from IITs or from IIMs, right? And look at Intel. 55% of the employees are from India, and they are from the same institutions. So definitely there is something about these institutions. They are the truly world-class institutions and great professors. Go around in the world and see the top institutions of the world. Where do you get the professors from? They are from these institutions. And Harvard has been having their deans for last couple of years from these institutions. So you got to appreciate within the given context, these institutions are doing a marvelous job, and I'm sure, as encouraged by the government, you give them an autonomy, you will find they are at par with the world. See, you can't have somebody, his hands tied behind and say, hey, you box. You free his hand or her hand, provide him necessary training and ecosystem, he or she would compete. That you have seen it in the country, not only in the education, but in other fields also, in the sports also. That's my take on these great institutions.
Indeed, sir, it was really a very wonderful answer from your side. We have to accept that these are the best of the education institutions of our country. And sir, my next question to you is that why are many private higher education institutions in India unable to produce quality manpower?
Oh, yes, that's a very ticklish question. It requires deep thinking. First, let me accept and tell you that private institutions in their own way has contributed immensely to the Indian education. Had it not been there, probably the education wouldn't have spread the way it has spread, especially professional education. The privatization of education, especially professional education, actually started in 90s, leaving apart some pockets of our southern states where it existed. And they are strong today because they were the early starters, no doubt about it. But real growth started happening in 90s in professional education, especially. Right. There is always an advantage with government institutions. That advantage is government institutions can afford to charge a low fee. Right? Government institutions have infrastructure contributed by the government and salaries contributed by the government. Therefore, they charge low fee. So when you look at that value add is always, whether it's a product, service, or education, value add is always equal to cost minus benefits. So at a given cost to a student, you will always find best of the students going to the government schools because of the one simple reason, that is the cost of education. Private institutions have to manage the entire cycle of revenue and expenditure. So may not create all those facilities to start with. But over a period of time, if you look at the older institutions, they are doing a marvelous job. They are getting into the top institutions of the country. So it will take some time. You can't expect a baby to start participating in competitive world immediately. And we call it, at least when you talk about the level playing field, private institutions are not asking for any resource support from government. They are only asking for the time. So they are trying to say, hey, give us a time, we would stand on our legs, compete with the best in the country. See, that is where your, councils or regulatory bodies has to deal with. You cannot have a standardized measurement across the so vast and different country. See, you can't have a same rule operating in best of the institutions at Delhi and an institution far flung, a small town somewhere in, say, Bihar or a UP. They cannot operate on the same rules. So that is where the regulator has to think of. This disparity is existing, will exist. So you can't say, hey, either you fall in or get out of it. No, that's not done. It means you are not nurturing them. They need a hand-holding. The student who's there in the far-flung areas, his objective of education are different. Someone who is there in Delhi. So you can't even control that because the institution in Delhi would like to compare itself best in the world. So that kind of institution would like to have those systems and processes matching to the best of the world. But through those regulations, you are actually constraining them, you are chaining them. So a rethink is required. I think the way the regulatory bodies are being restructured now through the new education policy, I'm sure this aspect would be taken care, and they start nurturing the institutions, especially the private, and give enough roadway to those who are already good to compete with the global institutions.
Indeed, sir. Again, it was a quite insightful answer from your side, and I must say the kind of energy you brought into this session was very inspiring for all of us. And also, I could say that there's a lot to learn from you. But today, sir, we have to wrap up this session at this point. It was a healthy discussion with you over the topic. Thank you so much, sir, for joining. We look forward to conduct more such sessions with you in future. Thank you so much, sir, for joining.
Thank you, dear. Anything for my audience and the youth of the country. Anything. Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
On the ground is where I stand. Never give up, that was always the plan. It's so cold outside, I'm alone.